The flickering news report cast a sickly blue glow across my Portland office. On screen, bodies clashed under a banner bearing my symbol, the intertwined hands of the Concordance Project. But there was no concordance here, only rage. They chanted my words, twisted into a war cry I never intended. "Thorne's truth!" they screamed, hurling bricks through a storefront window. My philosophy, born from a desire for unity, had become a cudgel. They called my beliefs a silly phase when I was younger. My parents, my professors. Now that silly phase was a global firestorm, and I, its unwilling architect, was watching my creation burn the world I'd meant to save. This wasn't unity. This was my nightmare. My phone buzzed against the desk, a harsh sound in the quiet office. The screen lit up with a name I now dreaded, Marcus Vance. My first, most fervent disciple. Now the self-appointed general of this twisted crusade. I stabbed at the screen. "What have you done?" The words were gravel in my throat. His voice was chillingly calm, layered over the distant sounds of sirens and shouting. "What you were too weak to do, Elias. I'm putting your philosophy into practice." "This isn't practice, it's a riot. You're perverting everything the Concordance Project stands for." A low chuckle. "Am I? To build a new world, you must first clear the rotted foundations of the old. Your words, Elias." Chapter 4. You gave the people a beautiful dream. I'm just giving them the tools to make it a reality. He hung up. The silence in my office was suddenly heavier than the chaos on the screen. He wasn't just twisting my words, he was quoting them. He was using my own logic as his weapon, and my creation was now my cage. The phone felt like a block of ice in my hand. Chapter 4. My gaze drifted across the room to the bookshelf, to the neat row of hardcovers bearing my name, The Concordance Project. The book that had been my vindication was now my indictment. It had all started in a cramped university office that smelled of old paper and stale coffee. I was 22, full of ideas I thought could mend the world. Professor Albright, my thesis advisor, had pushed my manuscript back across his desk as if it were contaminated. "Elias," he'd said, his voice thick with a weary, condescending pity, "this is a lovely piece of fiction. But a social philosophy? The world is built on conflict, not consensus. This silly phase of yours will pass once you face reality." My own father had been blunter. At a tense Thanksgiving dinner, he'd tossed my first printed draft onto the coffee table next to the wilting centerpiece. "People need leaders, Elias, not theories," he'd grumbled. "You want to change the world? Get a real job." Their dismissal was the fuel. Every condescending smile, every patronizing remark became the flint against which I struck the first spark. I would prove them all wrong. I would build a world they couldn't even imagine, a world based on my ideals. And for a while, I did. The book became a bestseller. The silly phase became a movement. And then came Marcus. He wasn't in a lecture hall or a think tank. He found me in the back of a dusty Portland bookstore during a poorly attended reading 10 years ago. He was just a kid, maybe 19, but his eyes burned with an intensity that both captivated and unsettled me. After everyone else had shuffled out, he approached, my book clutched in his hand, its spine already broken from use. "They don't get it," he'd whispered, his voice trembling with a ferocious passion. "They read this as poetry. I read it as an instruction manual." I was so hungry for validation, so desperate for a single soul to see my work not as a dream but as a blueprint, that I mistook his fanaticism for faith. He saw the anger I'd buried beneath my prose, the rage at a broken system. I saw a disciple. I took him under my wing, mentored him. He organized the first study groups, built the first online forums. He was the engine to my architecture. Now, in the suffocating silence of my office, I pulled the book from the shelf. My fingers, trembling slightly, found the page. There it was, a sentence I'd written as a metaphor for shedding outdated prejudice. But in this copy, a gift I'd given Marcus years ago, the line was underlined in angry red ink. "To build a new world, you must first clear the rotted foundations of the old." I had written it to inspire thought. He had read it as a command. My grand rebuttal to my critics had become his call to arms. My revenge had become his revolution. My fingers tightened on the book's cover, the smooth paper feeling like a confession in my hands. The betrayal hadn't happened on the phone just now. It had been a slow, creeping infection I'd mistaken for growth. For years, Marcus had been my shadow, my amplifier. He translated my dense, academic prose into something palatable, something that sparked. He built the website, managed the forums, organized the first chapters. I was the architect, he was the builder, and I had handed him the keys to every room. The first tremor came 3 years ago, during a planning session for our national conference. I was outlining a keynote on dialectical empathy. Marcus waited until the room was empty. "Empathy is a luxury, Elias," he'd said, his voice low and intense. "People don't want to understand their oppressors. They want to replace them." I'd dismissed it as youthful impatience. "That's the language of conflict, Marcus. It's the old way." "It's the only way that works," he countered, a chilling certainty in his eyes. "You've drawn the map to a better world, but you're afraid to walk the path because it's muddy." After that, he started creating what he called Concordance action cells. On paper, they were community outreach groups, organizing food banks, offering legal aid. I praised his initiative, blinded by the good optics. I was busy on the lecture circuit, debating smirking academics and proving to my father's ghost that my silly phase had value. I didn't see that Marcus wasn't building communities. He was recruiting soldiers. He was siphoning off the most disillusioned, the most angry, and feeding them a harder, sharper version of my philosophy. My version offered a difficult peace. His offered a simple enemy. The final, sickening lurch came 6 months ago. An internal poll showed that over half our members believed direct action, a term Marcus had popularized, was necessary to achieve the project's goals. I tried to issue a statement, a clarification from my central account, reaffirming our commitment to nonviolent change. The post never went live. My passwords were no longer valid. I cornered him in the server room, the hum of the machines a low thrum of dread. "I'm locked out, Marcus." He didn't even turn from the monitor. "It's for the best, Elias. Your hesitation is becoming a liability. The movement needs a clear voice." "It's asterisk my movement! It's asterisk my voice!" He finally turned, and the look on his face wasn't of a disciple, but of a successor who'd grown tired of waiting. "It was," he said, the words precise and cold. "But you're just the symbol now, the face on the banner. I'm the one who makes it move. You gave them a dream, Elias. I'm giving them a spine." He had performed the most elegant coup in history. He hadn't seized power. I had abdicated it, so focused on the ghosts of my past, I never saw the monster I was nurturing in my present. He didn't steal my creation. I gave it to him piece by piece, too proud to see he was building a weapon, not a sanctuary. The sirens outside my window wailed in chorus, a fitting soundtrack to my stunning, self-inflicted defeat. The wail of the sirens became a dull drone, the soundtrack to a city tearing itself apart in my name. The panic, the hot, suffocating rage, had burned itself out. In its place, a strange and terrible calm settled in my bones. The shock had passed, leaving behind a cold, sharp clarity. I was no longer the horrified creator. I was a strategist viewing a battlefield of my own making. I turned from the window and looked at the television. The chaos on the screen wasn't random. Marcus was a brilliant field marshal. I could see the structure in the riot, the coordinated movements of his action cells. He was running a play from a book I hadn't realized I'd written, a dark appendix that lived only in his fanatical interpretation. My creation wasn't a philosophy anymore. It was an operating system for organized violence, and Marcus had just rolled out the latest, deadliest update. He hadn't just stolen my work, he'd perfected its most destructive applications. He had turned my words into code that made people burn down their own world for the promise of a new one. I walked back to my desk, my movements slow and deliberate. My book, The Concordance Project, lay open. My vindication. My indictment. My father and Professor Albright had been wrong about my ideas being useless. but they had been right about me. I wasn't a leader, I was a theorist who had mistaken a bestseller for a revolution. I had wanted so badly to prove them wrong that I never stopped to ask if I was right. My petty quest for their approval had created a monster that would consume everything. There would be no grand statement from the founder. No pathetic plea for peace that Marcus would just delete. You can't reason with a firestorm. You can only starve it of fuel. And the fuel was me. My name, my words, my legacy. To stop Marcus, I had to dismantle the very thing I'd spent my life building. I sat down and opened my laptop. The blue light felt different now. No longer a window to the world's chaos, but a tool. My fingers moved across the keyboard, searching through the university archives, through faculty directories buried under years of digital dust. I found the contact page for the philosophy department. There it was, a name I hadn't spoken in 20 years. Professor Julian Albright, Emeritus. I stared at his email address. He'd called my life's work a silly phase. He was the first ghost I had tried to vanquish. Now, he might be the only person on Earth who could help me bury it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the cursor blinking on a blank email draft. 2. J.Albright at unipdx.edu, a 20-year-old wound. I had spent half my life trying to prove this man wrong, and now my only hope was to prove him right. I swallowed the bitter taste of my own pride and began to type. Professor Albright, you once told me my work was a silly phase and that the world was built on conflict, not consensus. You were right. I was a fool, and I have created something monstrous. My philosophy is being used as an excuse for violence on a scale I never imagined. I cannot stop it from the inside. They control the narrative. But I can discredit the source. I need your help to publicly, academically, and unequivocally dismantle my own life's work. I am asking to return to the university, not as a celebrated author, but as a cautionary tale. I am asking you to help me kill the Concordance Project. I signed it, Elias Thorne, and hit send, the click of the mouse echoing like a gunshot in the silent office. There. The first foundation stone of my old world was now rubble. I leaned back, my eyes burning, and waited. The minutes stretched into an hour. On the TV, a reporter was now standing in front of a burning library. A library. They were burning books in my name. A wave of nausea washed over me. My personal cell phone rang, not the office line. An unlisted number. I answered, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Thorne. The voice on the other end was dry as autumn leaves, laced with the same weary academic irony I remembered so clearly. Mr. Thorne, it's Julian Albright. I must say, of all the emails I expected to receive in my retirement, a mea culpa from the world's most successful utopian wasn't on the list. Professor, thank you for calling. Don't thank me yet, he rasped. I'm intrigued, not convinced. You want to use my university, my name, to what? Hold a press conference? Issue a pathetic apology? The mob you've created won't care. No, I said, my voice steady, sharp with purpose. Not a press conference, a formal debate. You and me, on a stage in the philosophy department's main lecture hall. The topic, the inherent fallacy of the Concordance Project. I will argue for the prosecution. I will be your star witness against myself. We record it. We broadcast it. Marcus can't stop that. He can't delete a university's feed. He can't silence you. There was a long pause on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in his intellectual mind, the sheer, delicious irony of it all. The student who rejected the master returning to help the master prove himself right all along. You'll give me complete editorial control over the broadcast? Albright asked, a new sharpness in his tone. Yes. And you will answer every question I pose, no matter how uncomfortable. Yes. My legacy was already ashes. There was nothing left to burn. All right, Thorne, he said, and I could hear the faintest hint of a grim smile in his voice. I'll make the arrangements. You've started a fascinating fire. It will be even more fascinating to watch you try and put it out with your own tears. He hung up. I dropped the phone onto the desk. Phase 1 was in motion. But Albright was right about one thing. It wasn't enough. A debate was a weapon of ideas, slow acting and subtle. The violence on the streets was a cudgel, fast and brutal. I needed a second front. I needed to cut the head off the snake, not just poison its philosophy. I closed my eyes, pushing away the image of the burning library, and thought about infrastructure. Marcus was the face and the voice now, but the movement was built on a digital skeleton. Forums, servers, encrypted communication channels. He had built the beautiful, user-facing architecture. But I had laid the foundation. 10 years ago, in the beginning, before the money, before the foundation, it was just me, a laptop, and a single, dedicated server I set up myself. We'd moved everything to a massive, secure cloud service years ago, of course. Marcus had overseen the migration himself. It was impenetrable. But the old server, what did we do with it? I remembered the conversation. I had wanted to wipe it, destroy it, a security risk. No, Marcus had insisted. It's a piece of our history, a relic. He'd smiled that disciple's smile. We can use it as a deep archive, a backup of last resort. A backup. My blood ran cold. The core data, the original user lists, the unedited early drafts of my work, the financial records before we went corporate, it would all be there. A digital time capsule. But more importantly, the server itself still had a hardline connection to our current network. It had to, for the deep archive to be updated. It was a backdoor. My backdoor. I scrambled for the old company ledgers, tucked away in a filing cabinet I hadn't opened in years. My fingers, coated in a fine layer of dust, flipped through the pages. I wasn't looking for finances, I was looking for a service agreement. An address. There it was. A monthly payment to a company called Iron Mountain Digital. A climate-controlled, anonymous data storage facility. Not in Portland. Not in some flashy tech hub. It was in a nondescript industrial park in Beaverton, 20 miles away. Utterly forgettable. I looked at the television. The riots in Portland were escalating, drawing all the police attention downtown. The suburbs would be quiet. No one would be watching a boring gray building full of computer hardware. Marcus had weaponized my words. But I had built the armory. He had my philosophy, my followers, my name. But I had the key. I grabbed my car keys from the hook by the door, my jacket from the back of my chair. The despair was gone, replaced by a cold, humming fire. He'd called me a symbol. A face on a banner. He was about to find out what happens when the symbol steps down from the wall and decides to burn the whole gallery to the ground. The 20-mile drive to Beaverton was a journey through a different world. On the radio, frantic reporters described a city under siege, my name a constant, damning refrain. But out here, the suburbs slept under a blanket of placid streetlights, manicured lawns, silent homes. This was the world I had claimed was rotting from the inside. Now its quiet, ignorant peace felt like a paradise I had willingly torched. The Iron Mountain facility was a monument to anonymity, a vast, windowless cube of gray concrete squatting in an empty industrial park. It looked more like a tomb than a fortress. My access card, unused for nearly a decade, was a thin rectangle of plastic hope. I slid it into the reader at the main gate. A green light blinked. The gate hissed open. The system I built still recognized its creator. Inside, the air was frigid and tasted of sterilized, recycled air and ozone. The only sound was the omnipresent, low-frequency hum of machinery. It was the sound of a million silent calculations, the heartbeat of the digital world. A second keypad granted me access to the main server hall. The door clicked open, revealing a cathedral of data. Endless rows of black server racks stretched into the gloom, each one marked with a small, blinking green light. An army of silent, obedient soldiers. My server was in row G, section 12. G12. I walked the cold, sterile aisle, the hum growing louder, vibrating up through the soles of my shoes. It felt like walking through my own mausoleum. And then I saw it. A single rack, older than the others, its casing a slightly different shade of black. The original server. My back door. I pulled a small toolkit from my jacket pocket and began to unlatch the front panel. The metal was cold against my fingertips. This was it. the kill switch. The central nervous system of the Concordance Project. From here, I could trigger a cascade failure, corrupt the core data, and sever Marcus's command and control. I could turn his digital army into a headless, disorganized mob. "Elias?" The voice was soft, reverent. I froze, my hand on the panel latch. I turned slowly. Standing at the end of the aisle was a security guard. He was young, no older than Marcus had been when we first met. His uniform was crisp, but it was the tattoo on his forearm that made my blood run cold, the intertwined hands of my project. He took a hesitant step forward, his eyes wide with awe, not suspicion. "It's really you. Marcus told us you were in seclusion, writing the next chapter." I kept my voice even. "I needed access to the archives, something from the early days." He nodded, a beatific smile spreading across his face. He looked at the server, then back at me, his expression one of pure, unadulterated worship. "The Genesis box," he whispered. "That's what Marcus calls it. The seed from which everything grew. It's an honor to guard it. It's an honor to meet you, sir. My name is Leo." He wasn't a threat, he was a believer. And that was infinitely more dangerous. "Leo," I said carefully, taking a step away from the server. "What's happening in Portland? It's a perversion of my work. It has to stop." His smile didn't falter. It tightened. "It's not a perversion. It's a cleansing. You taught us that. A wound must be burned clean before it can heal." Chapter 7. He was quoting me again. Another one of my damn metaphors, twisted into a justification for arson. "That's not what I meant," I said, my voice tight. "They're burning libraries, Leo. Hurting innocent people." "There are no innocents," he replied, his voice losing its softness, replaced by the hard certainty of the truly converted. "Only those who stand with the future, and those who anchor us to the past. Marcus is just helping people choose a side. He's the hand, but you are the word." He took another step, positioning himself between me and the server rack. "We can't let anyone interfere with the great work, not even you." The quiet reverence was gone. In its place was the unflinching gaze of a zealot. He thought he was protecting me from my own weakness. He saw my hesitation, my horror, as a test of faith he was destined to pass. My words were useless here. They were the very fuel for his fire. Arguing with him was like trying to talk a tidal wave out of hitting the shore. My eyes darted around the server room. The humming machines, the concrete floor, and mounted on the wall 10 feet away, a large, red fire extinguisher, a tool for emergencies, a heavy metal bludgeon, direct action, Marcus's term. My gaze met Leo's. He saw the shift in my eyes, the dawning of a terrible new understanding. His hand went to the radio on his belt. He was no longer a disciple, he was a guard. And I was no longer a philosopher contemplating a problem. I was a man in a cage with a tiger. My body moved before my mind could object, a raw, primal instinct for survival taking over. I lunged not at Leo, but at the wall, yanking the heavy red fire extinguisher from its mount. The pin clattered to the concrete floor. Leo fumbled with his radio, his eyes wide with shock at my sudden violence. "Code 3, intrusion at G12, it's—" He never finished the sentence. I swung the canister in a desperate, clumsy arc. It wasn't a hero's blow, it was the awkward, ugly swing of a man who'd only ever fought with words. The steel cylinder connected with his shoulder and the side of his head with a sickening, wet thud. He crumpled to the ground, the radio skittering away across the smooth floor, silent. I stood over him, panting, the extinguisher feeling impossibly heavy in my trembling hands. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the ultimate refutation of my own philosophy. I hadn't used dialectical empathy or reasoned debate. I had used a blunt object. To save my work from Marcus's perversion, I had to embrace his core tactic: direct, brutal action. A wave of nausea washed over me, hot and bitter. I had just won a debate using his methods. There was no time for self-loathing. Sirens would be coming. I dropped the extinguisher and turned back to the Genesis box, my hands shaking so violently I could barely unlatch the panel. Inside, the server's familiar lights blinked, a calm, green pulse in the heart of my chaos. I pulled a small flash drive from my pocket. My own kill code, a digital poison I'd designed years ago as a theoretical failsafe. A final argument. I jammed it into the USB port. My fingers flew across the attached keyboard, typing a single command string from muscle memory. It was the system's root execution command, named with an irony that now felt like a physical blow. Initiate _consensus. Final. I hit enter. There was no explosion, just a click. Then, across the vast server room, a wave of red lights began to bloom, spreading from rack to rack like a virus. The deep, unified hum of the machinery faltered, becoming a discordant, dying whine. I had just murdered my creation. Staring at the cascading failure lights, I felt no vindication, no relief. Only the cold, hollow certainty of a man who had successfully amputated his own soul to stop a plague he had unleashed. What's a passion or belief you had that someone else dismissed as just a silly phase? Tell me about it down in the comments.